On behalf of the Linder Road congregation, for those of you guys who are visiting with us again from other places, thank you so much for being here. Thank all of you guys, our Linder guys as well. Thank you guys for taking the time to be here. This will be a beneficial weekend for you. Our speaker for this weekend is Steve Higginbotham. I've heard Steve. I met Steve I think over 10 years ago. I think when I was still in school at Bear Valley, even maybe. But I've heard him a couple of times since then. And in fact, I heard him a couple years ago at Affirming the Faith in Oklahoma City. And I came back and I told Richard, I was like, this is a guy we need to have out here. His approach to what was his topic at Affirming the Faith was a difficult topic, and it was a touchy subject. And I thought he handled it very well. His demeanor was great, and I was just excited to be able to have him out here. He has great credentials. In this handout, the one that has a little schedule on the front of it, there is a full bio of Steve in this handout. He is preaching currently at the Carnes congregation in Knoxville, Tennessee. He has preached also in Glasgow, Kentucky. He's originally from West Virginia, and we were talking at dinner. It's interesting. It's in this bio. To me, I think of West Virginia. I kind of think of the southeast. But he said the town he grew up in was the same latitude as New York City. And he says in his own bio, he said, so he's a Yankee living in the South. I never think of people from West Virginia as Yankees, but I guess. But he is an accomplished speaker. He's preached all over the place. Like I said, I've heard him at different lectureships. I've seen his name on several different agendas at lectureships. But what I believe what he's going to bring to us this weekend is going to be an encouragement to us, no matter what our age, no matter where we are spiritually. He's going to talk to us about this idea, obviously, of make it happen. And really, I guess you could say the subtitle of this weekend would be finding a strategy to accomplish what God has set before us. And his first lesson for us tonight is, I love this title. It's the Fred factor. It's a strategy for us to influence our neighbors. And this is one of the things that we here at Linder Road, especially these lessons tonight, about outreach. How do we impact the communities around us? How do we impact the world around us? This is something that I know is important, is on the hearts of the men and the leadership here at Linder Road. So we look forward to hearing what Brother Steve has to say. Again, if you need any sort of note-taking equipment, it's all out there. Don't go now because he's about to start, so do it later. But we'll have a lesson, then we'll take a break. We'll talk some more about that after this first lesson, but I won't take any more time. Brother Steve.
Okay. I haven't actually seen the schedule. How long do I have?
45 minutes.
Okay. We'll put a couple things down. Well, one thing I do know, it is great to be here. I really appreciate it. I didn't sleep well last night. I don't fit on airplanes very well, and so I was awake at 2:30, and we got up at 4:30 and headed off to the airport, and got here this afternoon, and it's 2 hours. Well, I'm 2 hours later, so if I fall asleep on you, just shake me or something. But one thing I do know is that whoever designed this pulpit didn't make it for me. Could somebody come and hold this? No, I'm teasing. No, I'm teasing. I have a lot of fun with my height. I'm going to save most of it for Sunday, though. I'll tell some stories about that. But it's my first time to Idaho. Never been here before, and I came in, I saw the mountains and the snow. It's beautiful. And I'm glad to be here. I want to tell you this, too, before we get started. A few years ago, I was asked to, when I was living in Kentucky, I was asked to preach on a Sunday afternoon, well, it was Sunday evening. They wanted me to give 4 lessons on internet safety and usage, and it was a parental kind of a thing. And so I got down there. I preached Sunday morning in Kentucky. And I didn't wait to shake hands. I just went out the door, headed on down to Alabama, got there right before church started, sat down in the youth minister's office, and he was a good friend of mine. He had interned with me. He was a student at Freed Hardeman wanting to go into ministry, and he had worked 2 summers with me, so we liked to cut up quite a bit and laugh and so forth. And so I got in the office, sat down, we're talking maybe 2 minutes, and a guy comes to the door. He has a bandana over his face, has a hoodie and a ball cap and a gun, and he points it at me and says, "Give me all your money." And I laughed at him, and I said, "Reed, you're not going to get me on this. I'm not biting." And Reed's going, no, I'm not. I'm not doing this. And he came up again and he put it closer and said, "I said, give me all your money." And I said, "I'm not falling for it." And so Reed, the youth minister, said, "Here, I've got money, take mine." He probably saved my life by going ahead and doing that. And then as he was taking his money, I looked at that gun and, wait, I think this is real. And so he took my money eventually, and it was quite an evening. I had to still preach 4 times, and in between sessions, a detective was interviewing us. And I remember one of the sessions, he said, "Now, what kind of a pistol did he have?" And I said, "Pistol? I saw a cannon." It was big. I don't know. But anyway, whenever I go somewhere new for the first time, that always concerns me. So I want you to see right now, I don't have a thing. I hear he's loaded, but just leave me out of it. I'd rather not repeat that. But it is good, and I like the other slide that was up there. It said a men's rally in Carnes, which is in Knoxville, Tennessee. We just had a senior rally. Everybody's heard of youth rallies, right? I mean, youth rallies all the time. And we just had a senior rally. We're having a men's rally. Last weekend was our seniors rally, and what people would always say is, "Well, what's a seniors rally?" And the answer is a senior rally is the same thing as a youth rally, just a lot slower. And that's what we did. We had 4 guys speak to us that had 266 years of preaching experience. And it was just for older folks to come, and we had several hundred people together, and it was a great day. But and I look forward to this weekend being a great day. We've got some good things to talk about. The theme, strategies. That's what we're talking about. And see, here's what happens. We sit around and we bemoan the situation. We can sit in Bible class and we can identify and put our finger on, "Oh, this is not the way it should be." And "That's right, brother." And we pat each other on the back, but we have no solutions. No one is doing anything sometimes. We complain about the same things for years and years and years. And what we need is a strategy to fix what we're not liking, to fix what needs to be fixed. And that's why we called this Make It Happen. Quit talking about it and just make it happen. If you see something that needs to be better, well, then let's do it better. We can make that happen. And the 4 lessons that we have all deal with some really important things. Because the first one is this: we need a strategy to reaching our neighbors. I don't know if you're like me, but this is the way I am. I sometimes have failed to reach out to my neighbors. I've got neighbors in my neighborhood. See, it's not like it used to be. Do you remember when everybody sat on the porch and they talked to each other and everybody knew everybody? Hardly anybody knows anybody in our subdivision. We're all busy, and we don't sit on the porch, and we keep our doors closed, and we're afraid of getting on someone's nerves. And so because of that, I sometimes don't reach out like I should, and I need to remember that souls are at stake. That song that we sing, do you all sing that song, "You Never Mentioned Him to Me"? Do you sing that out here? Man, that's haunting. Is that not a scary song? You met me day by day and knew I was astray, yet never mentioned him to me. I'm afraid there are people who could say of me, why didn't you tell, you're a preacher. Why didn't you tell me about Jesus? I don't want that to be the case, but I need a strategy for trying to reach out to my neighbors and introduce them to Jesus. To do that, I'm going to start right here with this. You can find some amazing things on the internet. This is a comic book from the 1970s. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's called The Gospel Blimp. Okay? You can go online, type in Gospel Blimp PDF, and you can download it, and you have your own copy of the comic book. Okay? I'm going to tell you what this comic book is about because it's relevant to this topic here. In this little comic book, there's some Christians sitting around on their back porch. They've got their barbecue grill and they're grilling hamburgers and just hanging out together as brothers and sisters in Christ. And there across the backyard fence is their next door neighbor. And he's got some buddies out there too, and they're drinking, and, you know, they hear words every once in a while that they shouldn't hear. And so these Christians are sitting around having this little get-together, and they're saying, man, if only we could reach these folks over here on the other side of the fence. I wish we had some kind of a strategy to reach them. And so they began to brainstorm a little bit. And somebody said, well, you know what? You know that Goodyear blimp? Everybody goes, oh, wow. You know, if you see the Goodyear blimp, you stop in your tracks and you look at it, and it is high profile. Wonder what would happen if we bought a blimp. And just like, you know how you can put a marquee on the side of it and have running messages go, and they got excited about that, and they said, yeah, that's pretty cool, and we can do other things with it. We can put our services, the times of our service on this blimp, and we can, they just started, so we're going to buy a blimp. They buy a blimp. Then they realize, well, we got to pay for a captain to fly the blimp, right? So we've got to salary a man, and so that was more than they really expected, but they're paying this guy to drive this blimp around, and there he is, over ball games on Friday nights. He's flying his blimp and has the church service times on it, and then they got to putting some gospel messages on the side, and then they thought it'd be a really neat idea to tract bomb the community. You know, like take little gospel tracts, and you got them in bucket loads, and then as we fly over the houses and the yards, we're just unloading buckets of tracts. And all these tracts come flying down, and they're clogging up people's gutters, and people hate the church because of it. And they're just like, who do these people think they are? Oh, they cause such a big ruckus. And then the pilot wants raise, and it just finally, they get rid of the blimp by the end of the comic. It's not worth it, didn't work, and so they get rid of the blimp, and we're back to the back porch. And those Christians are sitting on the back porch having their little barbecue, and they look over there, and there's their neighbors drinking beer. And they say, man, it's just a shame we can't reach them. And they have a little girl, 10 years old, who hears all this talk and has witnessed the blimp and all this thing, and she understands that her parents want the neighbors to go to church. And so you know what she does? She just walks over to the fence and says, hey guys, would you be interested in going to church with us Sunday? Sure. All that gospel blimp nonsense, when all it took was somebody just to go say, will you come? Isn't that what was said in John chapter 1 when Jesus was being introduced to the apostles? Peter did not meet the Lord first. Who met him first? Andrew. And what did Andrew say? I think I found the Messiah. Come see. And then Philip went and got his friend, a man by the name of Nathaniel. And Philip didn't have all the answers because Nathaniel said, now, wait, where's this guy from? Galilee. What good thing has come out of what city? Nazareth. He had this prejudiced view. There's nothing worthwhile that's ever going to come out of that place. Philip didn't argue back. He didn't now wait a second, are you not aware there have been Old Testament prophets that came from Nazareth? That's not a correct He doesn't go into all that. He just says, come and see. And he does, and he becomes a disciple of Jesus, an apostle of Christ. You go over to John chapter 4, and you have that woman at the well, and Jesus tells her things about herself that he ought not be able to know. And she grows in a progression. She says, she calls him a Jew, and then she calls him Sir, and then she calls him Lord or Prophet, and then the Messiah. And she doesn't have all the answers, but she runs back to Samaria and she says, I think I found the Messiah. Come and see. That's all it took, is just to come and see. And we can do that. We don't have to hire blimps, hire captains to fly blimps and aggravate the life out of people by dropping tracks in their yard and all that kind of stuff. We can just, come and see. Invite people. That brings me to this. You see, you might be sitting there saying, well, what in the world's the Fred Factor? Well, the Fred Factor is a book. Has anybody here read it? As you can see, it's a really easy read. It's just a little book, and you can read it really quickly. But let me tell you a little bit about the Fred Factor. The author of this book is a guy by the name of Mark Sanborn, and he's a New York Times bestseller. He's written a number of books. He's a professional speaker by trade. Big corporations hire him in, and he comes and he talks and motivates the workers there, and kind of like a John Maxwell, if you've ever heard of him. But anyway, Mark Sanborn moved on one occasion, and they had just gotten their stuff in the new house, and there's a knock on the door. He goes, and he said, there's a mailman standing there. And the mailman said, hello, my name is Fred, and I'm your mailman. I'm just curious, what's your name? And Mark said, well, I'm Mark Sanborn, and he said, well, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm a professional speaker. And Fred said, the mailman said, oh, well, then that probably means you're on the road a lot, right? He said, well, actually, yeah, like 160 to 200 times a year, 200 weeks a year, I'll be out of town, or days, a year I'll be out of town. And he said, oh, well, then you're going to need your mail stopped while you're gone. I can take care of that for you. And so, this mailman sits down with him and goes over his calendar and makes a schedule of when to stop the mail and hold it and all these kind of things for him. Usually you're going to the post office to stop mail, right? But this mailman took it upon himself to come and do all this. And then Sanborn said, this mailman wasn't your average mailman. I mean, he was good. He was always on time. And if, UPS delivers something and left it where it could get wet, nothing bad about UPS. FedEx, did I say UPS? I meant FedEx. Sorry. But this FedEx guy, he would just get out of his mail truck and go up and pick the package and move it to a different part of the porch and cover it with a mat maybe to keep it from getting wet. Sometimes they would deliver his mail to the next door neighbor's house, and Fred would see that it was misdelivered. He'd pick it up and take it over and put it on. He's doing deliveries for FedEx. And then at Christmas time, you know, you leave things sometimes for your mailman. You know, you put a little money or a Christmas card and so forth. He put a Christmas card in for his people on his route and thanked them for allowing him to serve them. And he said, and what I found interesting is that every piece of mail that he put in, like the cards, always had stamps on them, even though he was hand delivering them and putting them in the mailbox, and the stamps weren't even processed, you know, but he was not going to put one in without it having a stamp on it, because that wouldn't be right. And so he did that. And Fred was just taken back. And he got to talking to neighbors in his community, and this man treats everyone the same way. Everyone knows the mailman's name. Can I ask you a question? Do you know your mailman's name? What? Yeah, never home. Yeah. Probably not many of us. Have you had a conversation with your mailman? Couple people, but probably not many of us. That wasn't the case with this mailman. He was doing, he's just an ordinary person, but he was doing his job extraordinarily. He was going above and beyond what he had to do, and was doing it well, and it caught people's attention. Sanborn discovered that the entire community there that he lived in, that little subdivision, they all loved Fred. And they didn't know him, but they were taken back by his kindness and his willingness to go the extra mile and to do the things that he did, and everybody was talking about Fred. And so Mark wrote a book about Fred. And what this book does really is he takes the qualities in Fred's life and says, these are what we need to possess. Now, I don't know if Sanborn understands, but what he actually did, and I don't think he meant it to be a religious book, but what he did is those principles that Fred was exhibiting are the principles you find in God's Word. That's where they originate. Interesting side note, I took this book, and I was in a gospel meeting in Columbus, Ohio, and I was looking for something to do one day. I went in the preacher's office, and I saw this little book, and I said, well, I can read that while I'm here, so get it finished. And I was so impressed that I thought, wow, this is good. I can make a 13-week Bible class out of this and talk about those principles and put the Bible to it. And so I did. Well, one day out of the blue, I got a phone call, and my secretary said, there's somebody by the name of Fred Sanborn on the phone wanting to talk to you. And I was like, yeah, right. This guy's a New York Times bestseller, and it was him. And he called me and he said, I saw on the internet where you were teaching a class on the Fred factor in your church. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, how many people were in that class? I'd like to just donate books. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, well, there's about 150. And he said, well, maybe not. He said, I'll do something else, but he didn't realize the class was as big as it was. But then he sent me a book and signed it and had a little passage on the bottom from the Bible and told me at the time that he was working on doing the exact same thing that I had just done. Turning it into, there's going to be a secular version and a biblical version, I guess. And that's what he's done. But here's what I did. I was so impressed with this, I got with our folks, and I was teaching our Wednesday night Bible class, adult class. And I said, this class is going to be about the Fred factor. And I told about what Fred was, who he was, and what he did. And so every week we had assignments, and I would say, you know, your assignment is to be Fred this week. Go out and do good. And then come back next Wednesday, and we'll report are Fred sightings. That's what we called them, Fred sightings. And, well, that got people excited. They thought, well, this is pretty cool, you know, and you got to come back. And after that first time when people said, well, hey, this past week I had the opportunity to do this, and it was a really neat thing. And so everybody got excited about that, and they were going out trying to find some good deed to do during the week, and then they'd come back and get to tell about it. And it was just going over. It had everybody excited, and they were working at it. Like, let me give you some examples. One guy, his name's Howard. He was at a car wash, and he was walking back to his car. You know how they have this do-it-yourself stalls, you know, at the car wash? He was walking past one where the guy had his car all soaped up, and the thing started beeping. You know, 10, 9, 8, it's about to go out. He had just gotten a handful of quarters so that he could wash his car. So he just stopped, took 4 quarters, put it in that man's timer to give him extra time, and didn't say a word, just went on and went to his car. That guy just stood there. Like, what just happened? Not only was this man a perfect stranger, but he was of a different race as well. And it just took him back. And so when he finished his car, he didn't leave the car wash. He waited until Howard got finished in his bay, and he walked over and he said, "Did you put money in my timer?" And he said, "Yes." "Do I know you?" And he said, "Not to my knowledge." And he said, "Then why would you put money in my timer?" And Howard said, "Well, because I'm a disciple of Jesus, and Jesus went about doing good, and I'm just trying to be like him." And that man said, "Where do you go to church?" And he said, "Well, I'm a member of the South Green Street Church of Christ." And he said, "I will see you there next Sunday." I've never seen Christianity lived out like that, the man told him. That's the kind, 4 quarters got a man to come to church just because you were thoughtful and put some money in another guy's timer. And Howard shared that story with us. There was also, I was driving down the street one day, and it's right at the busiest intersection in town, and this lady's car stalled at the light. You think people were patient? No. I mean, there were people honking horns and all this kind of thing. And I saw what had happened, and I was just immediately, I thought, Fred factor. And I thought, man, I'm going to have a great story for next Wednesday. And I whipped my car into actually Howard's pharmacy and parked, and I went to go over there to that car that was stalled. And you know what? There were 2 members of the church already at her door. 2 separate, not from the same vehicle, but 2 members of the church had already come to that woman's aid to help her out because they were trying to be like Fred. I had another opportunity. My oldest son was getting his license, his permit. Took his test, he passed the test, and we're going down to get his permit and all the paperwork stuff, and we're in line, and there's a girl in front of my son, and she was bubbling. She was so excited to get her permit. She couldn't contain herself. She was talking to Michael, my son knew her from high school, and they were just both so excited. And she got up to the window, and the ma'am said, "Is your name so-and-so?" And she said, "Yes, ma'am." You know, real emphatic like that. "Do you live at such and such?" "Yes, ma'am." And you've passed your test, so you're going to get your permit. That'll be $11. She went, $11? Does this cost? I didn't know. And she started reaching like in her back pockets, and she didn't have any money. And she said, "I didn't know the whole time. I didn't know this cost anything." And she's trying to find money. She didn't have any money on her. I'm standing right behind her. You know what I did? Nothing. I let that poor girl have to get out of line and go all the way home. If they write a book called The Claude Factor, that would be me. See, we have to look for it. I had the perfect opportunity. If I had $11, come on. I mean, that's nothing. And probably she would have paid it back to Michael at school, and she would have gone home and so excited and said, Mom, I got my permit. See, I've got my permit. And she said, and do you know they charge for that? It was $11. And I didn't even have it $11. But Michael Higginbotham's dad, the preacher down there at the church, he paid for my life. Do you know how good of PR that could have been had I just thought about doing good? That's what the Fred Factor is all about. And that's what I think we need to be doing with and to and for our neighbors. There's our strategy. In Acts 10 and verse 38, you know what it says about Jesus? Jesus went about, you finish it, doing good. What a great summary of your life. Jesus went about doing good. That's what he did. And these good things that we do, they don't have to be like these, just burdensome, big, hefty, expensive things. Jesus said in Mark chapter 9 and verse 41, if you would just but give a cup of water in my name, you'll in no wise lose your reward. Jesus said, just do something in my name. Do it because you're a Christian, and you'll not lose your reward. I know a guy who has good health. See, when I go to Walmart, I drive around for 30 minutes looking for that spot up close. Do you ever do that? But this guy, he intentionally takes a spot way in the back. And he told me, I do that because I'm a Christian. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I know that there are less fortunate people that can't walk as well and that don't have the health that I have. And so I deliberately leave spaces that they can have, and I'll take the one because God has blessed me with health. Now, the person who pulls into that advantageous spot right up front that was left because he drove way over yonder, do they know he did that? No. So does it count? Do you think God knows he did that? Absolutely. One of the most encouraging passages in the Bible is Hebrews 6 and verse 10. Because it says in that passage, God is not unjust to forget our labor of love. Some people may never know what you do. They may never, the good deeds that you do may never see the light of day, and no one will ever know. Maybe there are people that are never in the limelight, they're never standing up front, but they're just out there doing good every day, and people don't even know it. Don't get discouraged because you don't get accolades, because nobody's saying thank you, because the God of heaven is sitting on his throne and he's watching, and he won't forget. He's taking notice of every little thing you do. I sometimes find people who minister to family members that maybe have dementia of some sort, they don't get a night's sleep. The last time they were able to sleep through all night, they have to just stay awake because their spouse or their mother or father would harm themselves. They're up all night long and so forth. But no one sees that. We just see them at church, and they're in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, and they look like they're all put together, and we have no idea the struggle and the menial tasks that they have to perform behind closed doors that no one will ever know and no one will ever see. God sees. I know another family who are members of the church, and you know when you pass or when you're driving in the road and you see like an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car, the lights, the siren, get your attention. You know, it's a wow factor for the kids. You know, your kids go, whoa, you know, and you all watch it go by and everything. Every time they see that, they say a prayer as a family. Because every time you see an ambulance, somebody's hurting. And somebody's probably really scared. People who love that person who's hurting. And so they pray for those people in the ambulance or whatever, a house on fire or a car wreck or whatever that causes the fire truck to be going down the road. They say a prayer. Now, the people they pray for, do they know it? They never know. It's done completely behind closed doors. But does God know? Absolutely. And that counts. That is credited to you. And so we need to have that kind of an attitude. We need to start doing things, doing good, so that we can help people come to see Jesus not only through the gospel, but through our lives. One of the, I attended camp for a long time. Camp was not my favorite place. Staying on these little twin beds, and they had wooden rails at the bottom, and my feet hang off those beds much farther. And you know, if I wanted to roll over, I had to pull my feet up, you know, and roll over and then push them back. And it was a long thing. Well, my wife had been in Missouri for a week visiting with her mom, and I had my daughter, who was probably 4, at camp with me and the girl's side, and she's got to missing her mom. And I got a knock on my cabin door about midnight one night, and a lady said, we just can't get Anne-Marie settled down. She's crying, she's homesick, she misses her mom, she wants you. And I lived about 30 miles from camp, and I said, well, I'll just take her home tonight. Which was really for me and not as much for her, because I could lay in my own bed. But anyway, so I took her home at midnight and got a good night's sleep in my bed, and I was awakened in the morning. Well, let me say this before I tell you what happened. I'm in charge of the devotionals, the devos at camp, and that week I was emphasizing Jesus went about doing good. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be noticed. Just do good for the sake of good. And I'd pressed that in all kinds of devotionals through the week. Well, that morning I was awakened by my daughter, who was 4. She swings my door open, the door crashes against the wall, and I look, and here she is carrying 2 bowls of Cheerios. And I was like, oh, that means she came up the steps. You know, a 4-year-old with 2 bowls of Cheerios, there's going to be milk to clean up and all that. And I'm thinking about all that. And she brought me a bowl, and then she went down the hall and gave to her older sister a bowl of Cheerios. Then she came back in my room, jumped up on my bed, and I said, Anne-Marie, why did you bring me a bowl of Cheerios? You've never done that before. And she was 4. And she said, well, Daddy, I've been listening to you talk this week at camp, and you talked about how that Jesus went about doing good, and I just wanted to be like Jesus. Well, now listen. I may eat in some swanky restaurants in my lifetime, but I've never had a better meal than those soggy Cheerios that morning, because she got it. If we can just get that drilled into us, go about and do good. You work with people. You live next door to people. You don't have to go over with the Bible open saying, now tell me about your baptism again. That's not where the conversation needs to start. Let's show them what Jesus looks like in everyday life. Let's show them what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and how Jesus can change our lives. And we can have people, our neighborhoods, talking about us like Fred just because we're looking like Jesus. What I wanted my class to understand, and I let it go a few weeks as we were looking for Fred sightings. And at some point, after a few weeks, I said, guys, you do realize what we're doing here, right? This isn't about Fred. It's about Jesus. And what we're looking for are not Fred sightings. We're looking for Jesus sightings. And it's what we should be doing every day. See, they took on this project about Fred as this is an interesting, neat concept. This is going to be fun. And so they adopted that, and they were running with it, and everybody was coming back each week and telling all the things that they had done and how excited they were and what an impact it had and everything. That should be what we're doing every single week in the name of Jesus, not in the name of Fred. And somehow we have missed that doing good in the name of Jesus can be exciting and fun and motivating and encouraging. And I think it clicked. We kind of came in the side door, but people realized, oh yeah. So here's what I'd like to offer to you. What can we do? What are some things that we can do? Well, first of all, do this. Think small. You don't have to go big. It doesn't have to be an investment of your wallet. Some of the most valuable things are little, insignificant, don't cost a lot at all. My wife, when we moved to Glasgow 10 years ago, we had been married nearly 25 years. And we were getting stuff packed and moved, and I reached in the far recesses of one of our closets, and I pulled out this heavy box, and I pulled it down, and I said, what in the world is in this? And I opened it up, and it was love letters from college that I had written to my wife. Oh, it was awful. I hate to admit that I wrote those things, and it was so embarrassing, and I was sitting there laughing as I read some of them, and I called my wife in. I said, listen, I found this box of letters. Listen to this. And I started to read it. And you know what she did? She finished it. She hadn't probably pulled that out in 25 years, but she knew exactly what I said in that letter. She said, it's not about money. I wish I would have learned that 25 years earlier. I could have saved, I just write a letter every now and then and saved a lot of money. But it's the little things that matter. Do you remember when they began to rebuild the temple in the book of Haggai? Those who were old enough to remember what the old temple looked like, they wept. They saw that new thing. Man, it didn't have the gold. It wasn't as grand. It wasn't as big. And they wept when they saw it because it was so small and insignificant. You remember Zechariah said, despise not the day of small things. Don't hold small things in contempt. And we're also told that temple, though it lacked that physical glory that former temple had, that it would be more glorious than it, because Jesus would eventually be in that temple. And so don't despise the day of small things. In Exodus 17, the children of Israel are at battle, and you remember Moses would hold his rod out, and whenever he got tired, I illustrate this sometimes. I'll have like this. We have camp through the year, a preacher training camp. And we'll have these guys come and big, strong guys and stuff. And I'll just give them my Bible. And I'll say, just don't let it go down below level. Hold it here. Can you do that? Oh, yeah, that's nothing. Well, after about 3 minutes, it's something, And I tell the story of Moses, Aaron, and Hur while he's holding this Bible. And then it starts to doing this. It starts shaking. And I said, see, Moses couldn't hold his hands up. And when his hands got heavy and they lowered, the enemy began to win. And so Aaron and Hur got a rock and rolled it up so Moses could sit on it. And then they took his arm, and then I would have a young guy come up and grab this guy's arm and hold it up and give him relief. And you could see it come across his face. He's trying to be big and macho and stuff, but that Bible, just holding a Bible, was about to wear him out. But when the guy came and held his hand, he realized how important that was. He was about to fail. Well, we may not do grand things that get us, we got to write a chapter in a book about this guy. Just do the little things. They make a difference in the lives of people. This is something else that we can do with our neighbors. Go the second mile. Do you remember that statement in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount? Jesus said, if somebody compels you to go a mile with him, go 2. Do you know the background to that? You understand all that? I'm sure you do. Those Roman soldiers, how many people do you think would have volunteered to go 2 miles? If I were one of those Roman soldiers, I would have known those people must hate me. They must resent me, pulling them away from their work, having to walk a mile, carrying my heavy pack, and they don't want me here anyway because we're, an occupying force. That would have been so resented by the population. And they go a mile, and then they got a mile to go back to finish their gardening or whatever it was that they were doing. They had to have hated that. And so Jesus says to those people, when you're one that's picked to go that mile, go 2. And don't you know what that would have done? That Roman soldier would have said, you don't have to go any further. You can go home now. I know. I just want to go another. Why? Perfect question. Now you get to talk about Jesus. You just asked me why I would go a second mile. Let me tell you about my master. And what an opportunity that going the extra mile would have presented itself. And so in life, you don't have to do a lot of things. But if you'll go the second mile and do it, you'll make an impact. Sometimes my neighbors will put out trash and it's too full for the lid to go all the way down, and the wind will blow, and their trash will fall down on the ground, and I'm taking my trash out. I see it laying there. Do I have to pick up that trash and put it in mine or in theirs? No. But wouldn't it be a nice thing to do? When you're at church, do you ever see tissues laying on the floor? You have a janitor, I suppose, right? Somebody here that picks up and goes through after everybody's, made a mess. It's not your job to do it, but could you? And wouldn't that be helpful to somebody? Go the extra mile. Be kind to people. Serve one another. Jesus said, by the way, what is the 45 minutes? Because I don't even know when is it over? Is it over? Okay. I didn't look at the clock, and so I didn't know where I was. But Acts chapter 20 and verse 35 says something that is really interesting. We don't have the record of Jesus saying it, but Jesus said, it is more what? blessed to give than to receive. That's true. Now, that was a hard sell for me when I was like a kid, because when Christmas rolled around, man, I was all about getting. I wanted my presents. But I'll tell you, you know what I enjoy more now? I like watching my kids open their presents. I mean, there's so many black, how many black socks does a man need? It's hard to get excited about that anyway. But, you change. There was a lady one time who was constantly a complainer, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go visit her, and I'm not going to let her complain the whole time. I'm just not going to let her. And so I went, and I knocked on her door. When I knocked on her door, she said, first thing out of her mouth, well, come on in. I thought you forgot where I lived. How long's it been since you've been to see me? And, she started in on me. And we got through that. And she said, oh, my hip. Oh, you don't know how my hip's been bothering me. Oh, it hurts and stuff. And so I said, well, aren't you glad you're not like Brother so-and-so? He just had to have a hip replacement. Didn't faze her. My knee, too. Oh, my knee's been really upset. It's swelling. And I said, yeah, but Sister so-and-so just had to have a knee replacement. Aren't you glad you're not as bad off as she is? Oh, my back. I chased her all over the place that day. I finally gave up. She won. She was not going to consider anybody else. It was all about her. But here's the point. She was the most miserable Christian I've ever met in my life. And I'll tell you why. That's not the way God made us to live. When you buy products, have you ever needed a hammer and you could only find a screwdriver close enough, and so you just make do, and you can do it, but it's not effective. God made us with an owner's manual and said, for best results, we've got a tag that says that. And what those results are, if you want best results, you need to get outside of yourself and serve other people. That's what we've been made to do. Ephesians 2 and verse 10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. Serve one another. Also, adorn the doctrine of God. Now, that kind of sounds a little interesting, but comes from Titus 2 and verse 10. To adorn something means to beautify it. Do you know you can make the gospel look better? You can dress it up and make it look appealing. Sometimes we go around and we just sad and forlorn and look like, like in Malachi, worship is a weariness to me. Do you remember when they said that? They asked the question to God, how have we offended you? What have we done to bother you? Why are you upset with us? What have we ever done? He said, well, how about this? Your attitude that says, oh, worship is such a weariness. That's one. And he lists a number of other things. But we might have that attitude. Like there are two different kinds of people. They can say the same thing, but it means something completely different. One person can come in and say, oh, great. It's Wednesday night. We have Bible study. Somebody could come in and say, oh, great. It is Wednesday night and we have Bible study. Do you see the difference? For some, it's a drudgery. For others, it's like my relief from the week. I'm just saying we can make the gospel look better or look worse. And God tells us to adorn the doctrine of God. And then let me just say this. Make a plan and work it. Don't just sit here like, okay, here we are. We're talking about how we need to reach out to our neighbors and go the second mile with them and encourage them and serve them, and that's all good. We can all amen and go home and do nothing. Or we can go home and say, now how am I going to start doing this? James 1 says, don't be a hearer of the word, but what? A doer. When I was in college, there was a guy who came and spoke in chapel one day, and he said that for the last 20 years of his life, or however long, he said, I have written a letter every day to encourage someone. It can be a preacher, it can be a member of the congregation where I am, a member of some other place, just anywhere. I have written a letter every day of my life, and that just stuck with me. And I've preached about that through the years. I've talked about it. I've encouraged other people to do it. And yet here I was, I have never done it. And so this year I said, well, I'm going to do that. And we're in around, day 90 something or other, or however long it is, and I've been doing that. Well, it's fine to sit back and say, isn't that a neat idea? Yeah, that is neat. I bet he makes a lot of people feel good. Well, it isn't neat if you don't do it, because you don't help anybody by good intentions. So, find something that you want to do, and then incorporate it, do it. And that's what we got to do. And something as little as writing a little note, like I have been doing, and saying, and picking out some point in that person's life and saying, I appreciate it. I had a man call me, he actually came to the senior rally last weekend that we had. He's from out of state. And he came up to me and he said, your note to me came at the perfect time. He said, I had sat down, kicked back from my office, and decided I don't think it's worth it. I'm thinking about quitting. And then I turn on my computer, and there's that message. And he said, I'm back in the game. But I don't know if I would have been had I not gotten that letter. That's not about me. That's about the impact a small thing can have on the life of another person. You don't know what good you're doing. So, Fred, we need to incorporate a Fred factor in our life. But really, it's not about Fred. Who's it about? It's about Jesus. Let's be more like Jesus and go about doing good. That will reach your neighbors.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. Thanks for that. That's a great start for us.